Let's talk about economic sanctions. You hear about them all the time, right? They're one of the most powerful tools in modern politics, but they also operate in this kind of gray area that's really misunderstood. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain. Let's dive in.
So, check this out. The U.S. Treasury Department itself describes sanctions just like this. They see them as a tool of first resort. The whole idea is that they're, stronger than a sternly worded letter, but way less catastrophic than actual military action. They've become the go-to option when diplomacy just isn't cutting it, but war is a step too far. And this is the huge question we're really digging into today. Because as these economic tools get more powerful, more aggressive, the line between simple economic pressure and what you might call outright economic warfare, well, it's getting really, really blurry. And that has some massive consequences for the whole world.
Okay, so let's get into this new battlefield. To really understand it, first we need to get a handle on the weapons being used. And we're going to focus on the two most powerful economic tools in America's arsenal. First up, the classic economic sanctions. At their core, these are really just financial penalties. The goal is to deny your adversaries access to money and to markets, making it a lot harder for them to fund whatever it is they're doing that you don't like. It's all about applying targeted economic pain to get a political result. And the second weapon is export controls. Now, this is a little different. This isn't about stopping all trade, not at all. It's way more strategic. It's about stopping the flow of critical technology, like the most advanced semiconductors, to prevent your rivals from getting a military or technological advantage. So you might be wondering, how can just one country have so much economic power over so many others? Well, according to scholar Edward Fishman, the answer is its control over what he calls choke points. These are the critical nodes in the global economy that almost everyone has to pass through, sooner or later. The two most important choke points by far are the US dollar and those high-tech supply chains. I mean, think about it. Because most international trade is priced and settled in dollars, the US has this incredible visibility and control over global finance. And at the same time, the US and its allies pretty much dominate the design and production of advanced microchips. When you control those networks, you have some serious leverage. With this kind of immense power, the very nature of these tools is changing. That old idea that they're a peaceful alternative to war, yeah, that's being seriously questioned now.
And this is where we need to make a really crucial distinction. On one side, you have economic statecraft. That's about influence, using things like tariffs or aid to kind of nudge a country in a certain direction. But economic warfare, that's a whole different animal. Its goal isn't just to influence. It's to weaken or even totally cripple an adversary's entire economic machine. And maybe the best example of the shift toward economic warfare is the SWIFT ban. SWIFT is the messaging system that underpins pretty much all international bank transfers. So what actually happens when an entire country gets cut off from it? Well, it's basically a multi-step process of financial strangulation. First, the key global powers make the political call. Then, a country's banks are literally unplugged from the global messaging network. Almost immediately, the flow of money for trade, for both imports and exports, just grinds to a halt. The final step isn't just technical, it's complete and total economic isolation. Some scholars have started calling this a digital siege. And that's such a powerful metaphor, right? Because just like a medieval siege that cuts off a city's food and water, a SWIFT ban cuts off a country's economic lifelines. The whole point is to starve its economy into submission, all without firing a single shot. And this brings us to a really tough question. If these tools can inflict suffering that looks a lot like war, how should we judge them morally? The ethical breakdown here is incredibly complex. I mean, for centuries, we've had what's called just war theory to give us a moral framework for evaluating military conflict. But can you really take those same principles, which were developed for kinetic warfare, for actual bombs and bullets, and apply them to the systemic, indirect harm that comes from economic warfare? And this is really where the theory just hits a wall. Take the principle of discrimination, which says you have to distinguish between soldiers and civilians. In a kinetic war, you aim for the military target. But in economic war, the target is the entire economic system, so civilian harm is pretty much inevitable. Or look at proportionality. It's hard enough to weigh a military gain against direct harm, but it's even harder to weigh some political goal against the slow, diffuse, and long-term suffering of an entire population. This whole dilemma isn't just theoretical either.
the current rise in economic tension has some very, very dangerous historical precedents.
History shows a truly dangerous pattern here. In the years before both World War I and World War II, you see this toxic mix: rising nationalism, deep economic anxiety, and escalating trade wars that just poisoned international relations. An analysis from the German Marshall Fund warns that many of those same combustible conditions are bubbling up again today.
So the crucial takeaway is this. History teaches us that unbridled economic warfare isn't a substitute for military conflict. A lot of the time, it can actually be a prelude to it. It can destabilize the global order and make real, physical escalation much more likely. All of this leaves us in a really precarious position. The overuse of these powerful economic weapons carries enormous risks, not just for the targets, but for the entire global system. And the risks of overusing these weapons are immense. For one, it could actually speed up the end of the US dollar's dominance as countries scramble to find alternatives to escape America's financial reach. It can also alienate the very allies you need to make these tools effective. This whole push toward economic decoupling could unravel decades of global integration, creating a ton of instability. And maybe most dangerously, it normalizes a form of warfare that operates outside the traditional legal and moral constraints we've built over centuries. So we end where we began, with this fundamental question. Economic weapons are powerful, and in some cases, maybe they're necessary. But as they grow more and more potent, the line between applying strategic pressure and stumbling into global peril becomes thinner and harder to see. And finding that line is one of the most critical challenges of our time.